Some Purim questions, right? And our answers are coming from a wonderful, relatively new book called The Queen You Thought You Knew, right? By Rabbi David Foman, right? And it's startling. So let's begin at the beginning, and we're going to go pretty quickly because there's so much to cover, and it's so amazing, I have to tell you. And it just, as we go further, it gets more amazing, so I want to try and get to the end.
Okay.
First question was, why does the Megillah last so long? Remember, that was our question? Okay. So, because after all, in the 7th chapter, it's 10 chapters long, right? In the 7th chapter, Haman is hung, right? So it would seem you should be able to wrap up the story pretty quick and break the fast and get to the food. Right? But it doesn't go that way. It goes on and on for another 30%. Right? So why is that? Okay. Second question we had was, why is the name of the holiday Purim? Right? Why isn't it called the Day of Esther, Yom Esther, Yom Mordechai, Day of Redemption? Why is it called Lots, Dice, Raffle, whatever you want to call it, Pur? Right? As was pointed out last week, God doesn't play dice with the universe. Right? That was Albert Einstein said that. Next question was, if Mordecai wrote the book, how can he spend so much time boasting about his own nobility and grand appearance? Where's the modesty? Right? Next question. When Esther risks everything to go to the king, and he offers anything she wants, why doesn't she simply say, please come and save me and my people, rather than suggest he come for dinner that night? Right? Question 6. Oh, question 4. Why does a Jewish book spend so much time describing the grandeur of a non-Jewish king? We don't do this with Paro or Antiochus, right? We know historically who Paro was and who Antiochus is. But if you look at the story of Mitzrayim and you look at the story of Hanukkah, we don't talk a great deal about the court of Paro. We know that he had the magicians there, right? We know from historians how grand the Egyptians were, right? We know from historians that, you know, the conquests of Alexander and what happened to his empire. But it's not a big part, right? It's a huge part of the story of Purim is how grand everything is with Achashverosh. Why is that, right? Why does it? Because it's not. If it was a Persian book, it would make sense. You know, it's not. It's a Jewish book. So why this, right? So that was number 4, and we did number 5. Number 6. When Esther is in real danger, she doesn't weep, and she doesn't plead, and she doesn't cry. She makes some very good points, right? But later, when she's in much less danger, she breaks down and cries. Why? Right? When Mordecai tells Esther to go to the king, he says, regardless of what you do, the Jews will be saved. But if you don't go to the king, you and your father's house will be destroyed. Seems unfair. If she's not really needed, and they will be saved anyway, why threaten her? And how much more so when Jewish law does not punish cowardice with death and curses? What's this about? Number 8. Plundering Agag. Plundering Agag by King Shaul, right, is what destroyed Shaul HaMelech. Right? You remember he was told by the prophet Samuel, don't take any plunder, destroy everything, right? Don't take the cattle, don't take the women, kill everything, right? He had his excuses for it, right? And remember that Samuel asked for a sword, and he cuts the Agagite in pieces, right? And he tells at that moment that as you have torn my coat, so the kingdom will be torn from you and given to one better than yourself. But what does Mordecai do? When he writes the edict on behalf of the Jews, right, he says that the Jews can kill the women and the children, right? It's genocide, right? More than that they can take spoils. Has he not learned the lesson from his great-great-great-grandfather, King Saul? Curious, right? Haman's accusations are actually very mild. You know, he doesn't use blood libel, he doesn't use they're controlling the industry and the business and all those kinds of things. He says, it's the people scattered through 127 provinces. Where's the crime in that? Right? Number one. Number two, he says, they have their own laws and their own customs, right? Well, each of the 127 countries within the Persian Empire had their own customs and their own ways. Right? So that doesn't seem a problem. The third one is much more serious. He says they don't keep the king's laws. Right? So that's a serious one. But you would think he would have had, and by the way, he doesn't bring evidence about it. You would have thought he would have been, for the amount of hatred he had, that he would have brought it much more intensely. Why? Okay. Number 9. Why does the king arrange a royal marriage with a woman whose lineage is unknown? 10. Why are Haman's accusations against the Jew? Oh, we did that. So, 11. Why did Achashverosh ask Vashti to dance? And why did he have to have a party that was 180 days long? So these are the questions that we're going to address. Okay? On me. We're being joined by somebody who can read the Megillah.
How you doing, Moshe?
No, you take it. Don't just look. Yes,
very good.
Okay, so here we go. Mother Persia. Right? Vashti, as the queen, is more than just simply a queen and king in Persia were more than simply the royalty of Persia. Right? They were the representation of the physicality of Persia as well, and of the soul of Persia as well. So Vashti's role was the role of the femininity of Persia. And Achashverosh was Mother Persia. We use this expression very often about countries. Mother Russia is a common expression, right? And the king himself is the embodiment of the state itself. Very often, in Macbeth, right? Shakespeare uses the terms when he's talking about the king. He says, and Denmark did, right? Or Norway did, right? As if to say the whole country is embodied in the person. And so it was, right? But Vashti had a split loyalty, right? Vashti predated this empire, right? She is the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, right? Who is Babylonian, right? This is the Persian Empire. So her behavior is the behavior of somebody who is a blue blood married to somebody who is nouveau riche, right? I come to this with my own. Right? You're a lowlife, right? But I need you because we've fallen on hard times. But you will never attain the level that I am born at. So I think the answer to one of our questions is evident right at the beginning. Vashti, this quality of Vashti, which Achashverosh needed initially to legitimize his kingdom, becomes a liability between them, right? So who does he marry? He marries a nobody, right? She doesn't say where she's from. Nobody asks too many questions, right? She's very beautiful. She's very sweet. She seems refined, right? But she doesn't make a big thing about, I come from Turkmenistan, or I come from Uzbekistan, or I'm from Babylon, or I'm from... She's just like the no-frills girl, right? Or in this case, the president's choice. But she's not a brand, right? And what it means from Achashverosh's point of view, she is what is commonly called today a trophy wife, right? She's beautiful on his arm, right? And her whole existence is dependent on the king, right? Because she's not somebody who has her own blue blood, her own nobility. She's She is the empress, she is the queen, because she's married to him, simply, not because of who her father was. This is actually what he's looking for. He's looking for this in a person. Right? Now, remember, this isn't who she is, right? She is descended from kings, right? She is descended from Yehuda and from Binyamin, right? You know, Shaul and David. So he's actually got a problem on his hands, right? And doesn't know it. Right? And so does she. So does she, right? Because the moment Achashverosh knows that she, like Vashti, has her own nobility and maybe her own loyalties, her whole existence becomes fragile, right? Because he starts to relive the Vashti thing again, right? Do I need this, right? So she keeps herself a mystery, and Mordecai tells her to do this, right? So his purpose of wanting Vashti to dance for him, and his purpose of the 180 days, is you have to put yourself into another time and place. Right? You're ruling a kingdom that is half of the world today. Right? It extends from India all the way to Ethiopia. It's 127 provinces, maybe the biggest empire that ever existed. Could be bigger than the Roman Empire. Yeah. All the way to Ethiopia. Yeah.
Kush, Ethiopian people.
Kush, yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah. So it's a huge empire. No fax, no internet, no communications. To communicate from one end of the empire to the other, it could take months. How do you keep the empire together? It's a big problem, right? So you have an element of force, right? But you've conquered other countries that have their own armies that are supposed to be working for you, right? How do you prevent rebellion? Right? Well, the way you do it is the same way that nations traditionally have impressed countries with their power. You know, I think that one of the most dramatic yearly events was this parade that used to go on in Red Square, right? You would have the guys standing on the wall, right? And it always told you, you know, who was still alive and who was next on line, right? In what order it was a whole kind of thing about who was sitting next to who in Moscow, right? And then they would have this parade of the Soviet military might with missiles and tanks and everything, right? And it was very impressive. You know, huge numbers of people, all dressed beautifully, saluting, you know, the guy on the right. I don't understand how the guy on the right is walking like this, and everybody else is walking straight. They have a thing about it, right? But it's very impressive. They're not the first nation to do this. This was a normal thing to do. This is exactly what Achashverosh's party was about, right? He invited, who did he invite to the party? The military officers, the princes, and the governors from all throughout his empire, right? He wanted them to know that the seat of power, right, and his throne was grander than it ever existed. But more than that, he wanted them to take back this image with them. Right? This is a place not to mess with. We have many benefits from it. It's tremendously wealthy, tremendously powerful, and if they want to crush us, they can do it like a bug. Right? This was the purpose of this 180-day event, right? Was to make sure everybody knew how wonderful it could be and how dangerous it could be, right? And to go home with those thoughts. Now, I want you to keep in mind throughout what we're going to say today is that we're very interested in these people, right? These people, this group of people who came to the party, the 180-day party, appear 2 more times in our story, and they are critical each time they appear. This whole group of people, they appear 2 more times, right? Okay, in our Megilla, right? So, and the same thing with Vashti, right? I am married to the Babylonian Empire that ruled the world, and I conquered it, and it's mine, right? Right? And here is Babylon, right? Here is Babylon, Vashti, right? And when she didn't come to dance, There's a big question, right? You know, it wasn't just simply the humiliation of a person. It's, is Mother Persia divided? Is there a loyalty to something that existed before? Right? So it's a very dangerous environment for Vashti at that point, and a good reason to find a no-name bride. Okay. Let's move on to some of the most dramatic events. Right? Vashti is killed. Vashti refuses to come, and for a sin she forfeits her crown, maybe her life. After this terrible affront, the king and his ministers decide it is now time for a new queen. The king begins a national search for the girl to be his new bride. It is worth noting that as the searches progresses, the king betrays no special preference for a woman of noble blood. He does not seek to marry the daughter of a neighboring monarch, which would have been normal, right? You think about who Solomon married, right? He kept marrying princesses and queens of other nations. You know? He does not even restrict the search to women of good Persian ancestry. This is truly an equal opportunity beauty contest. Any girl could become the new queen, and perhaps that is only fitting. Once chosen, the queen will implicitly represent them all. In the end, Esther is the king's pick. So what we're saying is, if she has no background, she can be just Persian, right? If she comes from Turkmenistan, she's Turkmenistani Persian. But if she has no background, she can just be Persian. Now, interestingly enough, this is something that's followed Jews in many places. On one level, they're always perceived as Jewish, and another level, they're perceived as more American than Americans, more Canadian than Canadians, you know, more Italian than Italians, more Russian than Russians when they're there. It's a quality that Jews have in the world. And so it was with Esther. Esther did not tell of her people or her birthplace, for Mordecai had commanded her not to. That's from chapter 2:20. So, and she wasn't pushed very hard, really. So, what happens, right? Haman, during this whole process, moves up and up and up in power. You know, he began as a barber, right? And he ends up as the most powerful man in the kingdom.
At the beginning of the Megilla, he's the lowest of like the ushers of the king.
Right, that's right. But he's one of the key players in suggesting that the Vashti, he's called Memucan, right? At the beginning, suggesting that, you know, Vashti is a liability, and maybe her time has come, right? And during this process, he moves up very quickly. He ends up being able to sit, not with the ministers, but with the king on the level of the king. It's very unusual. And the king passes the law. We know the law is that everybody must bow when they see Haman, right? And Haman, to make sure to humiliate the Jews, wears an idol as an amulet around his neck. So now the problem is, there's nothing wrong with bowing, right? You know, you can bow politely to a person. It's not considered an issue, right? You're not honoring them as a god. But what happens if they're wearing an amulet? Right? It becomes more of a problem. What are you bowing to? Are you bowing to his amulet, or are you bowing to him, right, out of courtesy, right? So Haman wanted to wear the amulet for that reason. Right? Everybody bowed to him with one exception, right? And when I say everybody, it included the Jews, right? Mordecai refused to. Mordecai seems like an obstinate fellow, quite frankly, throughout the story, right? You know, the Jews could have just as easily said to Mordecai, come on, you know, back off a little bit here. We're in a foreign country. You know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. You know, when in Persia, bow to Haman. So Haman is infuriated by this behavior. Now remember, I left out, but I'm assuming we all know the story, that Mordecai had informed the king through Esther of a plot to kill the king, which had turned out to be true, and the people who were involved were killed. And Mordecai saved the king's life. Right? Haman's not particularly aware of that. We don't think he's aware of it. And Haman is so angry with Mordecai that he's decided a person of his power and importance doesn't simply kill the person that bothers him. It's a petty thing to do, right? He doesn't dirty his hands with it. He wipes out the person's nation. On top of it, he's descended from Agag, right? Which gives him a lot of motivation to want to do this anyway. It's revenge. But really his anger is very focused. You see that he doesn't seem to be concerned about other Jews. He's really angry with Mordecai. Every time he sees Mordecai, his blood boils. Right? But it's very important for him, as the senior minister of the crown, not to appear so angry, because it's inappropriate that this individual could anger you so much when you're so important. So he has to keep this idea that when he goes to Achashverosh, he doesn't say, and Mordecai, you know how he violates the law? He doesn't bow to me, so we should kill him. Seems petty. Right? Instead, he brings to the king different reasons. Right? The basic reason is there's a nation that doesn't obey your laws, and if one nation doesn't obey your laws, eventually all nations won't obey your laws. The empire will fall apart. We have to deal with this. The king doesn't view this as a dramatic thing at all, right? He says, he gives him the signet ring. He says, take care of it. Right? He doesn't even know who they're talking about. He never says the Jews. Right? He says the people. Right? King says, minority rights are your department, Haman. Take care of it.
The king gives him his money back and gives him wine also.
Right. That's right. Thank you. Yeah, because Haman wants to offer him kind of a bribe. He says, just take care of it. Right? That's your department. I don't want to get involved. Right? So now we're in the situation, a key moment that we can't do, right? And that is what's going to happen. Haman has promulgated a decree, and it is not simply a decree of genocide. It's a horrendous one. Free to kill, to murder, to destroy, to let blood, of all the Jews, to take the spoils. Every element of what became well known as a pogrom in the rest of the world is written up here. It's written up here, right? And who does he send this to? You remember the people who came to the party? This is their second appearance, right? They don't actually appear in our story. They're specifically exactly the same people that came to the party. Now get this note. So it's curious, right? Because why is Haman sending them this note? If Haman's people, his own militias, are going to do this, right? He doesn't have to involve the governments. Right? Historically, pogroms are not simply an element of successful anti-Semitism. They involve state involvement. Often it's a way of taking pressure off the king. Is to say, you know what all our problems are? Those people. Right? Take care of them. When my grandmother was a little girl, she told me that the Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria had passed a law. She was a little girl when she told me this. She told me about this, that she'd heard about it when she was a little girl. And the law was that if a non-Jew came into a Jew's home and broke even one stick of furniture, one chair, right, he was required to replace all the chairs in the house, all the furniture in the house. Right? So this is a way that the Austrian government, in principle, was going to control pogroms, right? That the Austrian government decided this is not a good idea. The emperor decided not a good idea. Now, interestingly enough, when I heard this story, I thought to myself, my sweet grandmother, Baba Mises, right? Literally Baba Maya says the story of a grandmother, right?
Yeah.
You know, we think that Franz Josef was a Jew lover. What's going on here, right? You know, he was a monarch of Europe. You know, they were not notorious for it. Right? And I thought to myself, probably in the village that she lived, the mayor, you know, the town leader, right, had decided it's enough, right? We should stop this. It's not being productive for us anymore. So he promulgated the law in the name of the emperor. Years later, when I became frum, and I'll tell you the story some other time, right? I found that my grandmother was right, historically correct, that the emperor, when he was very newly married, was unable to have a child. And one Sukkot, he went to a Rabbi. You know the story? He went to a Rabbi. And a Rabbi gave him a bracha, told him he had to pray to God and to drink sour apple cider every day for 30 days, and he would have a child. And the Rebbe's son asked him after, what's with the apple cider? Like, is that going to help them have a child? The Rebbe said, no. He said, but you have to give them something. Right? The main thing is that they have to pray. And in the end, he had a child. He credited the Rebbe that he'd gone to with it, and at other times went to him for advice, the same Rebbe. So it turns out my grandmother's probably was an edict to the emperor. But anyway, onward. So here we are. He sent out this message, right? This is a terrible moment in all of Jewish history, because unlike past experiences, here's somebody who literally controls all the Jews in the world. Right? There are no Jews outside of the Persian Empire, right? Because the Persian Empire is really the known world, right? And if this edict is going to succeed, right, it's the end of the venture. It's finished, right? It's not like saying, Mach Shemo, if the Germans succeed, there's still a lot of Jews in America, right? You know, or somewhere else, right? That was it, right? So it's a terrible moment, right? And at this moment is when Mordecai comes to Esther, right? And he says to her, right, you have to go to the king. You must go to the king. If you don't go to the king, the Jews will still survive. They're going to survive. Yehudim will still survive. Right? But you and your house and your father's house will be cursed, will be destroyed. Right? So now she has to figure out what to do. Right? So she goes to the king. But before she goes to the king, she tells the Jews, you have to be united. We have to have achdus. It's very important, right? So I want everybody, me and my maidservants are going to fast and pray for 3 days, day and night. And we expect every Jew to do the same. 3 days. Fasting, day and night. At the end of it, she dons her royal raiments, right? And now she assumes the role of ruler, right? Up until now, she has been the empress, the courtesan, the muse of the emperor, the love object of but now everything changes. It's the beginning of the change, right? She has become the queen regent, right? And as we will see, the rest of the story revolves around her thought process, right? Which, you know, is something to be, we'll see. So she goes to the king, and she enters the grand throne room of the Empire of Persia. Right? This throne room, right, could not be built until the throne was brought to it, because there was no way to get the throne into the throne room. The throne was so big. It was a copy of the throne of Solomon. Right? He wanted to have Solomon's throne, but it was too dangerous, because the throne itself had inflicted injuries in previous monarchs. So he had a copy of it made, brought to Shushan, and built the palace around it. That's a midrash. So she enters it, and now life and death is in the hands of the monarch. Right? The last queen who did not follow proper court etiquette came to a very bad ending. And now she's doing the same. She's counting on what? On chemistry between her and the emperor? On a miracle from Hashem? Something. It's not logical. Right? And there's even a question that we asked earlier. She doesn't need to do it. They're going to be saved anyway. Right? We know they're going to be saved. But she does it. And the emperor says to her, "Welcome, Esther, my queen. I'm happy to see you." Right? And he raises the staff to her. And what is it you would like? "My queen, you can have anything you wish, up to half of my kingdom." I have half, you have half, we're married, we have the kingdom together. Half of my kingdom. Right? And she says, "If I have found favor in the sight of the emperor, if I am pleasing to the emperor, would the emperor and Haman come to dinner tonight in my quarters? I have prepared a banquet for him." For who? For him. What him? It's a little unclear. If the him is me, says the emperor, why is she inviting Haman? The queen and I will have a private meal. She's inviting Haman? Why? And if the him is Haman, that's worse. This is a worse situation. Right? So now the king is thinking to himself, it's not such a good situation. Right? I'm going to go to dinner, but I'm keeping my antenna there because maybe there's something going on between my queen and the viceroy. Right? Is he trying to take her away from me? What's going on? Why did she say him? Why didn't she say you? Right? So they come to dinner. It's a very exciting time for Haman. Right? The king is a little bit more circumspect. Yeah. They have a beautiful meal. They have wine. Right? And now the king says again, "My queen, it was a wonderful meal. Tell me, what is it you desire? Ask for anything up to half to the kingdom. It's yours. It's yours." She says the same thing again. She says, "If I'm pleasing the eyes of the king, if it will bring joy to the king, would you and Haman come to dinner tomorrow night? I've prepared a banquet for them." For them? Wait a second. I was wondering who him was. Now it's a them? Who's the them? Right? It's a moving target. Right? And the king, everything hinges on words. In court language, it's a very refined kind of thing. People always being very careful about how they use words. She changed from him to them. And the king knows it. Right? What's it about? Right? Our boy Haman is on cloud 9. Right? I mean, he's part of the inner circle. Right? You can't get more inner. Right? The emperor and the empress of the greatest empire that ever existed in the world, right, have invited this barber become viceroy to dine with them. Right? Not once, but twice. Right? My day is made. Right? He's on his way home. By the way, the king is obviously going to be very troubled by this whole thing. Right? Why is Haman a part of this all the time? Right? What's going on between Haman and the queen? Right? Haman doesn't have any of these worries. He knows that he doesn't have anything with the queen, right? He loves, what's going on. He's rising in power. He wants to be looked at favorably by the queen and the king. It can only be good, right? He walks out of the dinner, right? On his way home, he's about to leave the palace. What does he see? Mordechai the Jew. Mordechai the Jew doesn't bow to him. It's worse than that. Mordechai the Jew doesn't acknowledge his existence. Doesn't look up from his sefer. Haman is galled. He is in agony, physical pain. He can't stand it.
Because he was his slave.
What?
He was his slave. Aman was Mordechai's slave. He sold himself.
Really?
He sold.
Does it measure that he was a slave?
He sold himself to Mordechai when they went from Jerusalem, when they stopped building Jerusalem. So they sent letter to the Persian government that Jews they're
going to rebel.
And you have to stop. So to whom to send? They sent Aman. And the Jews said, okay, we have to send somebody too. And they said Mordechai. They're going to this to the king, and Aman wants to eat. Mordechai took with himself food. And this one took, but he finished it. So he says to Mordechai, I want to eat. He said, no problem. You want to be my slave? He said, okay, no problem.
Sounds like the Aesop story. Yeah.
So the Mordechai takes his sandals off, writes that you're my slave. They sign. So every time when he's coming, and Aman wants him to bow to Mordechai to bow Aman, Mordechai just takes his sandals and says, you want me? You're my slave. And this is all this tension, because nobody knows about this.
Except for them.
That's amazing. I didn't know about it either.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, it's an amazing story. Yeah. So, and he literally says, he goes home. He's with his wife, right? He tells his wife, his close friends, how wonderful his life is. I'm the richest man in the kingdom, most powerful. I wear the king's signet ring. Right? I have 10 sons. They're rising in power as they grow up. They're evil like I am. I'm very proud of them. They like to beat people up. They're my kind of guys, right? Everything is great, except when I see this Jew, and we had a good explanation for why, I have no pleasure in life. Can you imagine? I just came from a banquet with the queen and the king, and they invited me one tomorrow, and I'm still miserable because I see this Jew in the courtyard, in the gates, and he doesn't even acknowledge I exist. I can't live with it. Fortunately, he has a concerned wife. She is knows her husband. She knows the medication he needs. Chapter 5, verse 14. Jerish's wife said to him, let a gallows be prepared 50 cubits high. It's like 100 feet high. And in the morning you go to the king. And you'll hang Mordechai on the gallows. That way you'll come with the king to the banquet feeling happy and in a much better mood. Shot. You want to change your mood, hang Mordechai. You'll feel much better, right? It's like, Jerish found some Tylenol for Haman. Why ask him? You should have to go to the banquet in a sour mood. Why suffer? When effective remedies are so close at hand. Come now. A little bloodletting is good for the spirit. Just make these gallows and call me in the morning. Right? So she has a good prescription for him. Right. Now this is actually kind of a statement about our characters, and this is one of the dramatic moments of it, right? Mordechai has been standing outside the palace. He's figuring out, what's our next move? How are we going to manage this? The process that Esther went through before she went to see the king was very thoughtful, very planned, worked out. She didn't do what I would have done. You love me, save my people, save me. She didn't do that. She didn't come for dinner again. Right? Haman, exactly the opposite. I can't stand it. I'm building a gallows tonight. Right? Tonight he builds the gallows, right? She says, go to the king in the morning. He builds the gallows, before the sun is up, he's in the courtyard of the king. Right? Now, he has a lot of access. He's an important guy. He's the vice minister. The king had a bad night. Right? Nobody's sleeping in Shushan that night. It's not a good night for sleeping, right? The king is thinking, what is going on with my wife and Haman? What's Haman doing? You know, with Esther. You know, 2 banquets. This is something, it's not right. Right? He couldn't sleep. Right? Couldn't sleep, right? Well, the best thing to do when you can't sleep is to read a boring book. And that's exactly what he did. He said to the chronicler, who, by the way, one of the medrashes was Haman's son, one of Haman's sons. He said, read me just something from the Chronicles. And so the chronicle opens up and says, and there was a plot against, and the king was, wait a second, let me just get this page here. And then it kept blowing back. The page kept blowing back, no matter what he did. It kept opening up to the same point. And so he reads the story of Esther, that Esther had told the king in the name of Mordechai. And it was written in the Chronicles. And at the end of it, the king says, yeah, Mordechai, what did we do for him? You know, it's not good for a king to have a debt. Right? And somebody saves your life. The chronicle looks, no mention of a reward. We guess it slipped through the cracks. The bureaucracy of Persia. You know, Mordecai doesn't seem to be taking it too badly. But he hears a noise. King hears a noise. And kings worry about assassination, so they hear noises very easily, particularly at night. He says, what do I hear outside? Outside? It's Haman in the courtyard. Right? It's nice. My viceroy, he never sleeps. He's always working for the kingdom. Right? Bring him in. In comes Haman, just glowing, right? Now, his biggest problem he solved, right? I'm going to kill Mordechai, right? And then I'm going to have dinner with the king and queen. This is a perfect day, right? For a guy like me, couldn't be better. A little hors d'oeuvre of killing Mordechai.
How can kill Mordechai without king's permission?
No, that's what he's doing. He's going to get permission, right? No problem. Why should he have a problem killing Mordechai? Mordechai is, okay, he's the leader of the Jews. He's an important person. He's a dignified person, right? But I'm Haman, right? And by the way, the king has already agreed to wipe out all the Jews without even knowing who they are. What does one Jew matter, right? So I'm going to have an hors d'oeuvre tonight of Mordechai, right? Of hanging Mordechai, followed by a main dish with the king and queen. It can't get better, right? In he comes, right? Turns out it can get better. Turns out it can get better. The emperor says, I'm so glad you're here. You know, you're a wise person. Tell me, if I wanted to honor somebody, me, the emperor of Persia, what would you suggest that I do to honor somebody? Thinks to himself, well, it's pretty clear who he's talking about, isn't it? It's me, right? His requests are very interesting. When we read it, we read that they are the royal garments, the royal horse, and the crown. And that he should be led through the city streets by a minister of the king, saying, this is what the emperor does for the man he wishes to honor. That's not what he asked for. It's not what he asked for. It's a small change in the words that is often not translated. Right? He requests the royal clothes that the king has worn. Not the royal clothes. The royal clothes the king has worn. The royal horse the king has ridden. Right? That's what I want. Right? The crown the king has worn. Now, the king is wondering what else does he want that the king has. You know, for this, right? What is the prize that the king has, right? He's referred to Vashti in the past as his vessel. You know, it was the relationships between men and women in Persia with the king. There was a small difference between the horse and the queen. So for the king, it's an illusion, right? He doesn't want the royal clothes, the royal horse. He wants the things that I have used, right? That have my essence as part of them. Right? What does that leave? Only the queen. So now all of his fears are prickling in the back. He says, excellent idea, do it for Mordecai the Jew. Right? Gesundheit, go take care of it, right? Haman has just gone from cloud 9 to the sewers, right? And literally, by the way, because it just gets worse, right? You know, he has to do this. It's tremendous, humiliating. And if you remember the story we just heard from Galia earlier, how much more so? You know, now he's actually acting like a slave, right? You know, but he's the viceroy of Egypt, right?
Even the what he asks. It's this, like the slave, like the low people, they want just clothes. They don't want something bigger. They want just give me clothes because I'm small. Clothes is enough for me.
I mean, by the way, if it was me, I probably would have asked for a title that had power. Right?
He's small.
You know?
He gets clothes.
You know, Haman himself is the viceroy. But he doesn't, it's not necessarily an inherited position. Right? Yeah. So he follows up and he does this. Right? He follows up and he does this, right? And we know the story, and that the daughter thinks that it's the reverse, Mordecai, and she despises Mordecai, so she throws the feces of the chamber pot on the person leading the horse, which is in fact her father. Mordecai, when she realizes it, she kills herself. Things are going downhill very fast. And Zeresh tells Haman, you know, when things start to go good for the Jews and bad for us, they don't change. She tells him this, actually. She knows, right? Zeresh, by the way, is Persian, right? Remember, she's Persian, and just like Vashti was Babylonian, she is part of the nation, right? An important part of it. Haman is not. He's a foreigner. He's an Amaleki. So the next meal, and now we're coming to the climax of the story. This took 9 years to happen, and begins to happen very fast now. Okay. Now comes the moment of truth. Right? They have the meal. Right? What's the problem? Esther has a very big problem. Right? Nobody knows she's Jewish. The assumption is she's 100% loyal to the crown. She has no other entity but the crown. Right? How is she going to succeed at getting Haman destroyed and his edict destroyed without revealing that she has a loyalty to another nation? Right? It's a problem at this moment, right? So we're going to begin to see the brilliance of Esther now, right? Because Esther does a lot of sleight of hand, and it's brilliant how she does it. She and Mordecai too. What happens?